Alrighty. My name is Rob. Once again back with VIP Auto Salon. You can call me the Beard. I don't care. We're going to install a Compustar CM900 brain into a 2007 Nissan Murano. I'm getting ready to do the bench prep, as we call it. Just a couple of the tools that I will be needing in order to do so. This one is a single button unit, which is super nice. I do like the way the single button looks. It's nice and small. If we hit it once, it's going to light up the lock button for us. That'll lock the doors. If we hit it twice, it's going to light up the unlock button. That'll unlock the doors. If we press and hold it until the little key light starts to flash, that's what will start the vehicle for us once we do the install. Get all this trash out of the way. Everything we need. Let me grab my wire schematic real quick. That'll at least give me an idea of what wires I need to hook up, including my bypass wires. Alrighty, and in my bypass plug it says that we need the white, red, white, black, brown, red, and brown, yellow. Brown, red, brown, yellow. And where I'm coming up with this wire schematic, if you're thinking about it or asking about it, is it comes directly off of Compustar, or the other one is iDataLink. It comes right off of their website. Once you flash their module, then you can look up what the wire schematic is for that particular module, that particular vehicle. It gives you the whole 9 yards. So now that we've got just the wires we need on that plug, I'm going to tape that plug up so that none of the other wires on there, even though they're not utilized, you never know if they have any residual power or anything of that nature. You don't want to burn up the unit. So I always tape those up. I like electrical tape at this point, once again, because there are connections there. Once again, even if there's nothing there, I like to make sure that those won't touch, and then I will touch all of this up with Tessa tape. I really like the felt style Tessa tape. And then my other schematic, Compustar also offers a vehicle wire schematic, as well as DEI does. DEI is Viper Products. This is the DEI's version of what I'm looking at. Once again, it tells me exactly what we need to do, what wires, so on and so forth. The biggest thing to take into consideration is if on this remote start there are 2 power wires that power up the remote start. Each one of them has a 30 amp fuse in it. This particular vehicle, if you notice, only has 1 power wire with a 40 amp fuse in it. There are 2 different ways you can do this. You can either tie both of these together before the fuse and up the fuse to a 40 amp fuse, or you can replace both of these fuses with a 20 amp fuse and hook them together in the vehicle. Me personally, the less wires to hook up the better, so I am going to cut this one off, tie these 2 together. Once again, by tying these together, I will also put a bigger fuse in it. You can always tell the current draw of an ignition by the fusing on the power wire. And I feel like an idiot because the one thing that I did forget to bring with me was my razor blade. There we go. And I am going to fire up my soldering iron, even though this wire here is being connected way down here by the harness. We solder all of our connections, so get that tied together. I'm going to take the fuse out for now, just so I don't forget to replace it with a different fused value, being a 40 amp fuse. Got that heating up, and while that's heating up, I'll finish looking at what I need. This particular vehicle has one starter with a second starter. So the way that I'm going to do that, my yellow wire is my initial starter. My blue wire is programmable. So that means I can make this a second accessory, second ignition, or a second starter. In here, on this particular unit, is your jumper. I think on this one it looks like I've got 2 starters and 2 accessories, so I'm actually going to run a relay to the second starter, and I am going to use this output for my second accessory. So let me jump that over from ignition to accessory. We got that, so we'll need those. We've got 1 ignition, like I said, 2 accessories, so I'm going to need everything else in this plug. Let me go ahead and solder this connection here real quick. Then I will tessa tape this up. There we go. Nice, good solder joint all the way around. Once again, since that is an electrical connection, I always tape it up first with electrical tape. Then I will clean it up with the tessa tape. Don't know for a fact that the tessa tape will let current go through it. It's just not its purpose, so. The other thing I want to do real quick is look and see if I need negative parking lights or positive parking lights. This one only has positive parking lights, so I will need the positive parking lights in this particular harness here. Now I'm just cleaning it up with the tessa tape. That's really all I'm doing. Making it look factory, making it sure it doesn't look like a rat's nest. You always like to be able to tell your installs from somebody else's, especially when it comes to any kind of warranty work or anything of that nature. And not only that, but if somebody else gets in there and works on the vehicle, if it looks like a mess and they're having issues, the very first thing they're going to do is blame anything that was aftermarket. And I usually typically go up just past the fuses, and then once I get into the vehicle I can finish taping it off. But obviously we're going to need at least that much length on the harness, so we'll do that. I'm only going to put 1 loop around here. I won't put one over the top like I always do until I replace that fuse. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to replace that fuse now so I can put there we go. I've now replaced it with a 40 amp fuse. I'm going to put my tape over the top. Once again, this is so that no metal or anything inside the vehicle touches the fuses, because believe it or not, I've seen it happen and it will blow the fuses. So we've got that harness prepped. This particular bypass module, which is the Blade AL, it does door locks through data, as well as some other features. I still have to check and see if this one has a factory hood pin. I believe it does. I have a Murano and it has a factory hood pin. And if so, we can utilize that. And now I gotta see real quick what my we will make the POC number 3 the programmable one. This should be all the wires we'll need off of this harness here. Alrighty, that's the way I like for it to look before I get into the vehicle. Once I get in the vehicle, I'll see where each of these need to go, then I'll route them and go from there. But that's pretty much how a remote start is bench prepped. Once again, a whole lot easier to get rid of all of these wires in this box before you're in the vehicle and before it's in your working area and your working space in your way. So I'm going to gather all this stuff up, move to the vehicle, and I'll meet you there. Murano apart. Shouldn't be too difficult. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's a Phillips here. One here. Two holding the OBD2 in. I forgot you have to disconnect the e-brake, or not the e-brake, the hood latch. And then I can't remember if there's a 10 over here in the kick or not. There we go. Just nice and snug from the cold. Imagine that. That is. Alright. Set that up under the car so it's out of the way. I need a 10mm to take off the knee bolster here. Alrighty, so now we are to the meat. Now we are to where we can see the ignition harness is here. We can see where it runs into the ignition. We can see the ignition plug here. We're also going to need our OBD2. So we will get it started. The first thing I'm going to do is access this here, which is the ignition plug. If you cut these correctly, you can actually stick another zip tie right through them, which is so nice. So you cut them just like that. Now we have exposed the ignition harness here.
I got the power of a king. I'm a blessing. If you listen to my words, you'll learn a lesson. I'm a blessing. That's just my message of a vision. I cooked up in the kitchen. That's my vision.
There we go. There's the ignition harness. Exactly what we were looking for.
Brain spasms when you see my vision. Open your mind with a quick injection.
No true friends in this day and age. Just crooked smiles and ill intentions. It's ill to mention the failed suspension. I'm pensive, never in the face of extensive criticism.
With all that being said, now that I got the wires accessible and ready to use,
You need advice, so I'm here to give it in the rawest form existing.
try to figure out where I want to stick the brain so that I know where to route my wires, how long to make them, all that good stuff. There's actually a panel over here that looks like it would work out perfect. It does.
Not to mention I'm the illest in existence, no bragging, so no
All
bitching.
my wires would route up and around.
Have to cut the head up off a chicken. It's dripping.
Dropping knowledge. Focused on
This way.
mission. Passion driven.
Perfect.
Lyricism causes cataclysms. Brain
So,
spasms when
I
you
will look
see
at my
vision.
schematic
Open
here,
your mind with
and
a
it tells me that my 12 volts is the green wire. Once again, I've shown this in other videos. You always want to test this. The reason being is not every vehicle is correct, not every wire schematic is correct. They are all different. I won't lie to you, a lot of the wire schematics are very good. Some of them are not so good. Grounding my meter. I'm going to strip back this 12 volt wire here real quick. Exposing just enough of it for me to test it. That is my 12 volt wire. So that one is showing me 12 volt. My meter over here, maybe you can see it from there. That is my 12. Let me actually see if I can. Just a little bit. I know once again it's hard to see, but it's also hard to do these videos by yourself, so I'm doing the best I can. If you have any questions though or comments, please feel free to ask. This is something that we do every single day. It's not something that we do once or twice. We literally do remote starts every day. We do window tint every day. We have a lot of different things that we do every day. We do plastic dip, we do air ride, we do bikes, we do, you name it, we do it. Another huge important thing when you are messing with the 12 volt wire, whether it's stripping the wire, whether it's wrapping the wire, whatever you are doing to that wire, you make sure that you don't touch it to any metal. It will spark, it can possibly blow fuses, and it will scare the shit out of you. The next wire that I'm going for is my starter wire. I just like to start at the top and work my way down of the wire schematic. So my starter wire, it's telling me, is black with a red stripe. So the way to test that one is it shouldn't show anything. This is my first starter. I'm actually going to strip both of.
Confidence in me go make me think that I'm a hero. If I am a loser, then I guess it makes me zero. Give the arenas, I bring the guy to the arena like a wizard, make you disappear like Tina. Can't see me, believe me, I'm doing everything.
So the way that you test the starter wire is you grab the factory keys here, I'm going to put my meter on the starter wire. You can't see anything on the meter.
Fuck it, I'm doing swell. Fuck it, I'm doing me. Fuck it, might as well
So,
take another drink. Fall into the
when I
sea.
turn the
Should've known
key,
this kind of thing would happen, but fuck it, fuck you and fuck
see that or
me.
not?
Man, I'm
Nothing
fucking
happens.
sorry, I had a rough week. I know I'm
See?
fucking massive like Johnny getting his ass beat like
That's why
Sundown. For not
you
brushing
always
his teeth.
check.
Goddamn, my brain's coming off
There are
the
actually two black and reds in this harness, and this one is my ignition wire. So now I know that that one is my ignition. Go ahead and get that one hooked up since I'm right here. And that's the other reason you always check. There are certain vehicles that have more than one of the same color wire in the harness. Why, I couldn't tell you. It's not like they could make them, or they couldn't make them different colors very easily. Since my soldering iron is hot now, I'm going to go ahead and solder these two wires. Cracks me up because it always takes a little longer to solder a connection when the inside of the vehicle is this cold. Even the wires are ice cold. I don't know if you heard it or not, but that was actually ice and snow falling off this vehicle. You know, nobody thinks about a remote start till their butt's cold. Got those two wires done. I'm going to tape them up. Especially this 12-volt wire, making sure nothing touches it. Got the 12-volt wire taped up. Taping up the ignition wire here. Now let me see, another black. Yep, that's thicker black and red. Guarantee you that's the starter wire here, but we will test it just to make certain. I like them. The only problem is the wires are so cold that they're just slipping on it. There we go. I had to open the doors and actually put a heater next to it just so you wouldn't see my breath while I was doing it. The shop is nice and warm, but these vehicles, when you pull them in and it's 2 below. So with this one, it doesn't show anything on the wire. Nothing still. When you crank it, it goes to 12 volts and then nothing. So 12 volts and then nothing only while it's cranking. That's how you know that that one is the starter wire. So that's starter number 1. Starter number 2 is black and yellow. I see that wire here as well. Let me get this one wrapped and I'll test it. Here's my black and yellow wire. Got it stripped back. Let me test it. As this vehicle's dripping ice cold water on my legs. I know it's hard for you to see. Maybe you can see it like that. Nothing. 12 volts just while it cranks. Then out. So that's my second starter wire. I'm going to use this yellow just so that I keep them about the same. Get those two soldered up here real quick. Good solder joints on those ones. Alright, so that wire that I just hooked up, that's my second starter, which was off the relay. So now I got to run this wire down and hook it into the output off of the relay. And thought I brought that one last connector, but I must have forgot it. Let me grab one. Alrighty, we got the connector here. Got that hooked up to the relay. Next on the list is accessory, which it says is red, and there is a second accessory which it says is white blue, which are my last two wires. Obviously we would assume that they are correct, but you always want to check them just to make sure. And as you see, if we turn the key on, that shows us 12 volts constant. When we turn the key off, there's nothing, no residual power. That's our first accessory. And accessory number 2. Check it just the same. Once again, like I've said in my other videos, accessory is typically the first click on the key. The second one is your ignition. That one tested out correct as well. Back in the older days, or olden days, or whatever you want to call it, the accessory was actually the backwards flip on the key. So if you wanted to just sit there and listen to your radio and not burn up a bunch of power, that would be the way to do it. Get these last two wires soldered here real quick. And I forget where it said the parking lights were that were a positive trigger, and it says parking lights, positive trigger, red, blue, above the driver's kick, gray 14-pin plug. Alright, so that one will take a little searching. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't in the actual switch itself while I was down here. So a ground is another big one on remote starts. They typically tell you to go to the driver's kick panel. That works fantastically. I definitely agree with that. The only other place that I go typically, and it would be in a vehicle like this because I can see it, is the cross member that is a huge solid piece of steel that goes all the way across. That's typically where I ground them. I have never had a ground issue with a remote start. Grounding them there. Once again, there are certain vehicles though that you wouldn't want to ground it there just because of the vehicle itself. This one is a perfect candidate for being able to ground it there. Let me see here. I'll try to look back in here for the I guess while I'm right here I might as well do the brake wire. It's staring me in the face. And it's obviously on the brake plug itself. And if I'm looking at this brake plug, there's a 4-pin connector with only 2 pins in it, and there's a 2-pin connector. And this one tells me that my brake wire should be the red with the green. So let me look and see if I see a red with a green here real quick, and then we'll test that. And the brake wire should show nothing when the brake is not being pressed and 12 volts when it is being pressed. Red, green, red, green. I think that's a top wire right there. And yep, I wasn't getting a very good connection. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's hard to. There we go. So as you can see, when you hit the brake, it shows 12 volts. When you don't hit the brake, it's nothing. That one is my brake wire, which will be this blue with a white stripe. This is my brake wire here. I'm going to unplug that so I can get to it a little easier here. Alrighty, there's the wire I need. Got it stripped back a little bit. Alrighty, got that one connected. Give it a good old solder joint here. Perfect. Tape it up, plug that one back in. We'll look for the parking lights and then we'll do the bypass module. Alrighty, that's plugged in, and as you can see, I try to keep all my wires about the same length, so when I clean this up, it's going to look good, it's going to clean up nice and neat, and it's going to look factory. Alright, so next on the list was the parking lights, and that's shooting me all the way over here. It's telling me that it is a blue, or red with a blue stripe. Once again, above driver's kit, gray, 16 pin plug, pin 14. Red, blue. And there are a lot of plugs up here. Red, blue. Bet you that one's it right there. Yeah, this one's in a tight little spot here. But once again, even with it being in a tight spot, we still make sure that no matter what it takes, we're soldering our connections, making sure it's done correctly. Most of the people out there, I should say, I wouldn't even call them competitors, but most of the people out there, this would be a prime example of when they would use a T-tap, just because it was a little bit more difficult to get to. And no, that one was not the correct wire. Take that up. Test this wire right here, even though it's not where it says it's supposed to be. Sometimes some of these wires are not so easy get to and or find. Like this bad boy. And I guarantee when I do find it, it is not going to be easy at all to get a connector on, or to get tied into. Back side of that same plug, barely can see it, guarantee. And yep, there she is. So this is it. I just grabbed the wrong one. See, same color, wrong wire. We got it now. slack on here so that I can route it up along with the rest of the wires. Solder it real quick. Move along. There we go, and that just shows you that even with it being in a super tight spot, it can still be done. You can still make a solder connection, get it taped up, still make it look factory. It really just depends on the quality of job you want to do. I don't know about you, but I like when people look at the job that I did and are impressed because of the quality instead of being disappointed because the workmanship is poor. Alright, so we've got our ground. Once again, this is a perfect candidate for grounding it to the brace that goes across. I'm just going to get the ground ready and then I'm move along to the other wires here. All the rest of them are bypass wires, which means they're at the actual ignition switch, and I think I have to grab two here at the OBD2. There's my wire schematic for I hook up two of them here at the OBD2. I'm actually going to grab me a razor knife because I forgot mine. The one thing I haven't looked at just yet is where the BCM is. On this particular model, you have to get to the BCM to interrupt the security light. That's how it arms and disarms the security while it is remotely started. Once again, I don't mind peeling this back a little ways because I will make it look factory again. And it looks like I'm going after pin 6 and pin 14. And the wire colors for those are blue and yellow. That'll be these two wires, and typically can high and can low are typically wrapped or wound together. This one. And that should be my brown, red, brown, yellow, which are these two. Bring those over, take into consideration that it's going to come up and then drop back down to here. And the Brown red is high, and can high is the blue. So brown red is the blue. The other thing that's good about making sure it's not a rat's nest in here when you get done, making sure you can see every wire, where it goes, what it's for, what it does, is the simple fact that if you ever have to troubleshoot your own job, it makes it much easier for you to troubleshoot your own job. Let alone if anybody else has to troubleshoot it for you. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the BCM right there. And the security light to the right of the steering column, green orange, pin 23. Green orange, pin 23. So that's the only plug. I can't get it out with one hand, but I'll unplug that and get to that one last wire. We just have to interrupt that wire so it has an input and an output. Ground it, program it, and test it out. Zipped up. I don't actually clean that up and tie it up until the very end. I have been in certain vehicles that the can high, can low wires were incorrect as far as which one was high, which one was low, and I actually had to just swap them. I prefer to swap them right here. So I always wait, make sure everything's working before I finish cleaning it up and zip tying it, all that good fun stuff. Now let me see if I can get to this darn BCM. And it's telling me that the BCM green orange. Green orange. Cut a little bit of tape back so I can actually see the wire colors here. Once again, some of the stuff is not the easiest to get to. There we go. Alrighty, now I got the plug unplugged. And it's telling me bottom row, I needed green and orange. It should be the third pin over. Let's see if the third pin over is green and orange. And is it? It is. So now the fun part of cutting this. Connector side is going to be my red black. The other thing too, especially when it comes to like data wires and things of that nature, if you don't solder them and they're a resistance based wire and you use a T-tap or some other sort of connector, you can definitely change the resistance on the wire by doing so. Alrighty, let me solder those two connections real quick. I'm going to go ahead and pull my module out one last time because we will need to see it in order to program it. And this is the other reason why I always double check my work. When I was cutting those wires, I accidentally cut the white with the black off and left the white. The white was supposed to have been cut off, so I gotta switch that real quick down here. See, even people that do this stuff every single day can have little errors like that. You just always have to double make sure that everything is correct. So all I'm gonna do is switch those right here. The other part of this too is I could have easily just got on their website. These are programmable wires. I just happened to grab the wrong one. It was easier just to solder this than to pull the whole unit out and go in there and plug it back up on the computer. And there we go. We got that one soldered. these other wires. We'll get that plug back in and ground this unit and test it out. Ground stuff. We'll ground that bad boy and test it out and program the bypass. Alrighty, got the ground stuff here. Put my ring terminal on here real quick. I need my Phillips bit again. And as you can see, even though I did a bench prep, it still becomes a slight mess in here with all the connections and wires being cut, made shorter and things of that nature. Alrighty, so now we've got it grounded. Now I've got to turn it on and see what this light does. It's actually supposed to go solid blue. I think it said that it goes red, out, blue. That's exactly what, oh, my hind's in the way. Blue is what we were looking for. So it programmed. I'm going to take the key out. Once again, I always just like to test things prior to finishing up. It's a whole lot easier to fix it in the process. So I'm just going to plug the antenna in before running it, test the remote start, then I'll run it, finish tying it together and putting it up. So I just hit the button once, it locked the doors, flashed the parking lights once. I'm going to hit the button twice. It flashed the parking lights twice and unlocked the doors. I'm going to press and hold the button until the little key light starts to flash. I hear everything kicking on. The vehicle fired up just fine. You always want to check just to make sure that there's no check engine lights or anything of that nature on that wasn't on prior to you doing the remote start. And everything looks like it is good to go. I always like to make sure that the key takes over properly. Stick the key in, turn it to the on position. Hit the brake, make sure it shuts it down. Key out. Good to go. Alright, so now the fun part, getting it all cleaned up and put back together. Try to make it look as factory as possible. So once again, I like, even though I put a little slit in this, I always like to reutilize as much of that as I can, just once again to make it look like factory. One thing to keep in mind too is if you ever cycle the key and don't have certain things plugged in, I'm only telling you this because I know this for a fact on this particular vehicle. If you cycle the key without the airbag modules being hooked up, such as one of the seats, it will throw the airbag code, or airbag light I should say. Once again, I only know that because in my own personal Murano, I put a 5-channel amp under the passenger seat, which has a airbag sensor in it, and even once you reconnect that sensor, the light is still on in the dash. You have to reset it via a scanner or a scan tool. But of course, you don't want to put your seat back in when you're testing and tuning an amplifier, so I left the seat out and put it all back together and reset the light after the fact. This is kind of time consuming. That's probably the reason a lot of people don't take the time to do it. Back in the day when I started doing this stuff, an alarm and remote start was always supposed to look 100% factory. I don't know why people have ever gotten away from that. I'm just telling you that if you have issues and it ever goes to a dealership or any place else, the very first thing that they're going to blame it on, if your install looks horrible, is the install or whatever it is aftermarket that you have had put on the vehicle. I don't mind it being time consuming because once again, when it's all said and done and somebody looks in here, they're like, wow, that's a pretty clean remote start install. Or, you know, or they don't even know that there's a remote start install in the vehicle. Alright, once again, I'm going to try to utilize as much of this factory loom as possible. It's not going to be 100% possible because how much we've added to the wiring here. But I like to get it at least close, or get as much of it shoved in there as possible. we go. Let me get that. Actually, before I do that, let me run this antenna real quick. With Compustar antennas, they're always supposed to run long ways across the windshield, not up and down. That's all for range. Alright, even though this is black, I still try to run it along with the rest of my wiring here. The only thing that may hinder me a little bit on this particular install is the length of the antenna cable. So get some zip ties. And you should be good to go. Once again, if you're slick, you can actually utilize that factory mount right there for zip ties. Actually going to even zip tie this portion up a little bit. There we go, that should mount no problem. I'm going to leave that loose, maybe stick one more zip tie on it. And the only reason being is it's the antenna. To be tucked around. There we go. Around that. And I know I'm particular, but I've got a particular pair of cutters that I like to use for cutting off zip ties. A particular pair of flush cuts. And the reason I like them is they actually cut the zip tie off 100% flush, and you don't have to worry about the zip tie cutting you. I don't know how many of you have gotten into an install and somebody didn't cut the zip tie off flush and it cuts you up. It's pretty aggravating. Well, let's do one more quick test on it, and then I'm going to finish putting the dash back together and let you guys get on with your evening. So we heard it lock. All the clicks you're hearing are from the relays flashing the parking lights. Double click. We just heard it unlock. If I press and hold once again until the key light starts to flash, that's what's going to start the vehicle. The vehicle just did all of its checks. It's going to stay running. Once again, I always test the brake pedal. The brake is the shut off so nobody can steal the vehicle. If you guys like the videos, please like and subscribe. If you have comments or questions, please leave them. Other than that, you guys have a wonderful evening. This was another Compustar remote start install by VIP Auto Salon.